30 seconds.
Well, I cut closer than that. I got almost 10 o'clock.
Let me do it. There we go. All right. That's exactly where I needed it. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our first Sunday school class after the big lockdown. We're out here in the sanctuary. You're always welcome to come at 10 o'clock if you want to. We have a few here today that are kind of scattered out. I'm going to crow about this again if a thought comes to me later on in the service. We had 334 people last week who viewed our broadcast. That doesn't mean that they saw it live, but some either live or recorded. They probably couldn't tell whether or not it was Memorex. But Andy helped me download long distance from the video camera, so we had both of those versions running. Totaled up, 334 people came by. I may have watched a minute, 2 minutes, the whole thing, but I'm very grateful. We are actually because of the difficult circumstances, we're actually making contact with many, many more people than we ordinarily would on a given Sunday, even when things were normal. This is what the Sunday School Quarterly looks like. We call them quarterlies. I always have. That's what I learned at the Flint Baptist Church. You get a new lesson book every quarter, so that means 4 different books, and they have generally been about various Christian subjects, spiritual subjects, or about books of the Bible. We began using Explore the Bible many years ago. Lifeway publishes it, and it is always about a book or some books of the Bible. This one, this quarter, that goes all the way through the end of August, is about the book of Proverbs and the Song of Solomon, or the Song of Songs, as it's called variously. So we're glad that you're tuning in. We're glad that you're here. You're welcome, as I said, to come to join in with us. You will have plenty of room to sit by yourself if you come, but we're more than happy to have you tuned in via your smartphone, your laptop, your computer, or your tablet. So if you want one of these, we've just determined it's kind of a first come, first served basis. But if you want one of these, we can mail one to you. We can drop one by for you. And I always, personally, I never teach the quarterly. In other words, the quarterly is about the same material. It's about the same passages, the same books. But it gives you a different take. It gives you a different teacher's point of view or his interpretation. It has different material. It looks at it from a different point of view. Then when you come to class, I want you to have my take on it. What did I get from it? And then I don't know how it might go for us here in this kind of circumstance. What's enjoyable about a Sunday school class or a small group is that everybody in the class can ask a question or they can make a comment. And so we get a variety of different things that we can learn. To be honest with you, when class members ask a question or when they speak up or when they make a comment, that's, I believe, when the greatest amount of learning takes place. Right now, the element of Sunday school that is missing is the fellowship. Being close together, sitting beside each other, enjoying a cup of coffee. It's been my pleasure since the first of the year to barge into the senior adult Sunday school class. I am a senior adult. It's odd to hear people talk about I'm having a middle-age crisis, but they're not middle-aged. They're middle-aged. If you're thinking of 50 years of age as being middle-aged, you must be planning on living to be 100. Because that's middle age. That's half of 100 is 50. But I think a lot of us, we're way past middle age. I know that I don't think I'm going to make it to 100. But that's in the Lord's hands. Anyway, I miss the company, the fellowship, the conversation, and we always pray together. So just those few words of comment. Pray for the Eccles family. Victoria Reeves is a member of our church. That's Andrew's wife. And her brother Justin passed away this week. Pardon me. Very young man, and died very unexpectedly. His funeral will be Tuesday. Pray for Victoria and her family. You've all met Julie, her mother. She visits with us quite frequently. Has not been too long since Justin's twin brother Josh visited with us. I was just talking and texting back and forth with Josh last week. He has an interest in sleight of hand and card magic. He's a good Christian as well, and so I was conversing and talking back, messaging with Josh just a few days ago, and none of us had any idea that this tragedy was looming before any of them. Danny was just mentioning he was working at home this week, the Bowling family, and they're unrelated to what he was doing there. I started to text back, "What did you do?" But he was painting, and the fire that broke out at his customer's house had nothing to do with the paint. So quite an eventful week, and you pray for the Bowlings. I don't know if they've been able to move back into their home yet or not. I learned from Facebook last week that Betsy has been told that she can dispense with using her back brace. I don't know if she's had to fall back on it for expediency any at all. She may have thrown that thing away or hidden it or stored it, but we're grateful that she's still making progress. Betsy Stevenson, back surgery, serious back surgery, not too long ago, getting rid of that brace now. Danny also told me that Libby Gatlin and Joan Smith lost a cousin this week, first cousin, and the funeral was just the other day. Keep these people in your prayers. Keep each other in mind, and keep each other in your prayers. I know that I'm probably forgetting or overlooking someone, but pray also for Beth Skidmore and kids, special needs in their life. But let's go. We're looking at the book of Proverbs. As I said, if you study your lesson, if you read your quarterly, you'll have one teacher's point of view, or the way he would teach it. There are some excellent helps. First of all, in the very first page, the first paper page, there's just the schedule or the calendar. And today's lesson by this author is called Chartered Waters. Chartered Waters. He didn't make much reference, I noticed, in the lesson, though, to sailing or being out on the water. As a matter of fact, I couldn't find a single reference. Evidently, it has chartered waters. Waters are when you're sailing or you're in a shipping lane, you're out on the sea, on the water. The way they get chartered is that people have been there before. People who mark where the reefs are, where the land masses are, where the sandbars are. So you can navigate through dangerous areas if you have someone who are telling you by observing their charts where the dangers are. So obviously something like an iceberg moves around. You can't chart that. But the book of Proverbs is kind of telling us where the rocks are. Don't hit them. Look out for them. Steer clear of them. But in the front of the book, in your quarterly, it's very helpful to tell you. And I will be looking at, the first lesson is about the first two chapters, or primarily. He just talked about the main verses in the first chapter. Today we're going to try to look at the first two chapters. Also, if you go over to, or 3 pages over, there's a Bible reading plan. Sometimes if you're in the habit of just kind of picking up the Bible and you don't know where you're going to read from, here is a day-by-day, daily Bible reading that's suggested, and you can check it off. This is very helpful, too, if you didn't need just a little bit of guidance. There's also, on page 6, a kind of like a dictionary or glossary of common words. The definitions are there, so that's very helpful, too. We'll define some terms as we go. All right, let me place that aside then. If you will, we'll put it back here on the banister. And I decided mine is not Chartered Waters, but Smart Living. And now this is what I've chosen to be the title for the entire study of the book of Proverbs. We'll be in Proverbs for several Sundays. Smart Living. I like the word smart. And you know, the key word in the book of Proverbs, of course, is wisdom, to be wise. Much of the book of Proverbs was written and recorded by King Solomon, the wisest man in the world, maybe the wisest man who's ever lived. When he was just a little boy and had found out that he was going to be a very, very, very young king of Israel, God actually appeared to him and asked him, he says, I'll give you anything you ask for. Give you anything you ask for. Well, this little boy asked God for wisdom. Well, he was already very wise, wasn't he? He could have, later on, God said, okay, God was impressed. Well, when God goes, wow, or something like that, or whoo, you know, you've punched the button with God. I try to, it's important for us to live our every day. You know, sometimes we personify God or we anthropomorphize God. God is not much like us at all, but I think every once in a while he'll let out a whoo. Or, the Bible says that something pleased God or that Jesus was happy because of something. So try to make God happy. You know, in Psalm 103, the psalmist David said, bless the Lord, O my soul. I know a lot of times when we're praying, we're only asking God to bless us. Well, we can be a blessing to God. I hope that you'll seek to be a blessing to God. So as we look in the book of Proverbs, we see the writings, and it's not entirely. There are some, we're going to note when a particular chapter or a section is by someone else, and the book of Proverbs said, these Proverbs are from this person or that person or this group of people. And but wisdom, and I like the word smart because sometimes we talk about a little child, just a little baby, and as they're growing and as they're picking up the skills of learning how to talk and how to walk and how to feed themselves. So what? That baby's really smart. Sometimes we talk about a dog being smart or a cat. So even a dog and a cat can be smart, and so it has a certain special meaning. You know, someone like that can be smart and doesn't have anything to do with how many books they've read, how many years of school they've completed, or how many degrees they have. And of course, I think that has the possibility. The more we learn, whether at school or from a tutor or a teacher or a professor, the more we learn, it is possible that we can become smarter. We can grow and know more. But people who can't even read or write, people from all walks, of all ages, from every kind of circumstance, we might look at them and see that they are smart people. And so I like this term because one of the favorite terms with the word smart we don't talk about it much here in the South because we're not street oriented. But to be street smart means that someone who is really sharp awareness and perceptiveness of the things around them and how things work and how things are. Street smart.
Yeah, you know what's going on.
That's right. So it's talking about being aware, being intelligent, and it has to do also, I think, it can have to do with education or with knowledge and understanding, learning, and opportunities. You know, our parents probably were the first teachers we had. A brother or a sister may have taught us a thing or two. Then we had teachers or tutors at school. All of these made contributions into our life. But we also know that you can go through your entire life, that we know people who have had many, many opportunities, and they are no different, perhaps, in many ways from you or I, and we come to a conclusion that they're lacking a lot of smart. Let's go on. I'm going to click on this. We are talking about smart living because I think the book of Proverbs is not a religious book. It doesn't say this is how to be spiritual. It doesn't talk hardly, it very seldom mentions anything about the Lord in his temple or the Lord and the rituals. The Proverbs is not about the commandments or the statutes. It's not about the laws. It's not about the sacrifices or holy days. It's about daily life. And it's about what to do and what not to do. And the assumption in this first section by Solomon is that people really know right from wrong. We really do. Everybody naturally, humanly speaking, instinctively know the difference between right and wrong. It's part of our human conscience. It is a part of, I know everybody's different, and there are so many people who are very calloused, or there are exceptions to every rule. But one of my favorite proverbs in the film world is from Forrest Gump, where he, as a little boy, someone called him stupid. I personally like the word stupid. I want to avoid being stupid, and sometimes I feel stupid. I know that when I've made mistakes, sometimes it's because I did stupid things. I made stupid choices. As Ron White, the comedian, says in some of his cleaner humor, you can't fix stupid. Well, I believe you can fix stupid. You can correct it sometimes, or sometimes you can improve and bring it even to the level of smartness. But somebody on the school bus happened to imply that the little boy, Forrest, was stupid. And he had a quip from his mother, which he often did. He says, "My mama says, stupid is as stupid does." And that's really a good encapsulation of the book of Proverbs. I can't say the word stupid around the Beals house. Mommy says we're not supposed to say stupid or shut up. But in those terms seem to go well together in my vocabulary often. So I have to be very careful. I don't call people stupid. But with all these different classifications of intelligence or human mental ability today that are both medical or sociological, I regret sometimes that we have lost the capacity for using the word stupid. Because sometimes what it means is someone who's just foolishly ignoring the truth or foolishly ignoring principles, or they're putting themselves in a position that they don't have to be in. I think that deserves a derogatorily descriptive word, and stupid will do about as good as any. And what it means is, what Forrest meant was, if you do stupid things, that's really what makes you stupid. It's not any of your IQ or your level of intelligence or how many years you've been to school. As we look at the Bible, it's divided into two, which makes it very important to compare the Old Testament and the New Testament. You're going to find that what the book of Proverbs is about is a pretty simplistic view of the world of life, dividing almost everything into twos. Now, we're looking at the book of Proverbs, and we see, is a part of the Bible. There are 66 books in the Bible. There are 39 in the Old Testament, 39 different books in the Old Testament, 27 books in the New Testament. The book of Proverbs is in the Old Testament, and our Jewish friends would not do, and neither do they describe our Old Testament as the Old Testament. They do see it as a covenantal book, or a book that was about a covenant, or about several covenants. They don't see, the only thing that makes it old is that it's ancient. When we think of old, we think of this is ours now, and this is no longer our testament. We're under a different testament. The New Testament is pretty much about Jesus. The Old Testament is about the Jewish people. When you get to chapter 12 in Genesis, the first book of the Bible, it talks about Abraham, the first leader, the head, founder of the Jewish nation, the Jewish race. And so the rest of the Bible is about Hebrew people. Now the Old Testament, one of the books in the one that we're looking at is the book of Proverbs. Now, Jewish people, they think of what we call the Old Testament as the Bible. And they divide it into three parts. The first part is the first 5 books of the Bible. They call it by the Hebrew name Torah. It means law. So when they speak of the law, they're talking about the first 5 books of our Bible. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. Then the second section in the Hebrew Bible, there are divisions, are called the Ketubim. They're the writings. The about some of the books in the writings because that's where the book of Proverbs is. And then the Nevi'im, and that's the prophets. Any book that has a prophet's name on it, Daniel, Ezekiel, Hezekiah is not one. That's just a trick, isn't it? The book of Daniel, the Obadiah, all the different minor and major prophets, they're in the section called the Nevi'im. So that's the way the Hebrew people look at their Bible. Dividing things or putting things in portions helps me understand things. It helps me see things better. I don't know if that's the same for you. But evidently the reason these kinds of gatherings and these kinds of selections are made is because a lot of people say, what list is this in? I make lists all the time. It helps me understand. In the section of the Bible, the Old Testament called the writings, there are 5 books that are called wisdom literature. Wisdom literature, in other words, the whole purpose or point of those letters, primarily, is to, not the whole purpose, but the primary purpose is to impart wisdom, to give instruction. The 5 books of wisdom literature are Psalms, Proverbs, the book of Job, the Song of Solomon, sometimes called the Song of Songs, and the book of Ecclesiastes. So Proverbs is a part of our Bible that's in the writings. It's also part of the wisdom literature. Jewish people often name the book of the Bible from the very first word that's in that book. The very first word that is in the book of Proverbs is the word mishle. Mishle. And it literally means parables. I know a little bit more about the Greek language. The word parable, I came to understand what a parable was when I studied the teachings of Jesus. Jesus told stories. The word parable, parabole. The word bole, we got our word ball from it. Bole means to throw or to cast. Para means beside. A parable is when you throw 2 things beside each other. You look at them. Let's look at this one now. Let's look at that one. That's what a parable is. Jesus said, the kingdom of heaven is like this or like that. So he's comparing the kingdom of heaven to a man who had 2 sons, or a man who was a shepherd and had 100 sheep, and one strayed away. And so the Proverbs are, if you want to, it helps me to understand that they are little small parables. They compare 2 different things, and sometimes 3 or 4. Now, they're not just sayings, or even wise sayings, not just pithy platitudes, or something that people say. People just say that. That's a figure of speech. They're not just old wives' tales. I hesitate to put that in there. I didn't want to offend any of the old wives. There are old men's tales as well, but nobody ever listens to them. What's that song Randy Travis sing? It's men out on the front porch. What are the old men talking about? The weather. What are the old women talking about? They're talking about the old men. Well, perhaps we could say that it's good advice in poetic form, and really the Proverbs are written in poetic language. Doesn't mean they rhyme, it just means that they are in a certain metric form. So I would say, here's some good advice, another way of understanding or looking at the parables. One of the most important things or tools as you learn in understanding the meaning of Proverbs is understanding couplets. Couplets, in other words, 2 things, a couple of things. Oh, sometimes I get so discouraged when I go to the store. You see these young people who are waiting on the store, don't ever ask them for a dozen of anything. How many of these you want? A dozen? Exactly how many do you want? I want 12.
Well, there is a baker's dozen.
Yeah, and the baker's dozen.
The baker's dozen.
I remember when on my first day of seminary, Dr. Gray Allison was teaching personal evangelism. He's from Louisiana, and he asked us a question. Now, Danny and Liz have lived in Louisiana. Dr. Gray asked us, do you know what lanyap is? You know what lanyap is? We had no idea what lanyap was. Well, if you go into many stores down in Louisiana, all over the state, and you go into a store, a lot of times they might have a little sack. It's a little something extra. Or they might have a little basket, and they just reach over that basket and put some of that into your bag. You didn't pay for it. You may not even want it. In the sealed paper sack, it's just their way of saying thank you, we appreciate you, and here's something a little bit extra. And that's what the word lanyard means. Well, understanding, I find the same thing when I'm talking to young people at stores when I want a couple. Exactly how many do you want? This almost gets speechless. A couple is two. So anyway, let's go on. Now here's some of the couplets that you're going to see. First of all, there's contrastive couplets. Don't let this worry or confuse you. You're going to get past it. The teaching of Proverbs is very simple, but it helps me to put a certain saying in a particular category. Contrastive means, here's this, and this right here is completely different. There's this, and then there's that. And they're not like each other at all. They are contrasting. They're different. And so here's one in Proverbs 13:1 says, a wise son accepts his father's discipline, but a scoffer does not listen to rebuke. So here's a wise son and a scoffer. And they're completely different. If you're a wise son, good things happen. If you're a scoffer, you're not going to listen to anything. So those are in contrast. The book of Proverbs is filled with those things where I like giving directions like this. Someone says, can you direct me to the store where that blue store is? And I say, do you know where 3rd Street is? And they say, yes. I said, it ain't nowhere near 3rd Street. One of my favorite directions, though, is if you see the cotton gin, what? You've gone too far. Now, your GPS has a way of saying that, and they just say, recalculating. You've gone too far. You're off track. Well, here we go. The second couplet is called completive. Completive. It says something, and then it finishes it. It completes it. Here's one. Proverbs 16:3 says, commit your works to the Lord, and your plans will be established. In other words, if you'll do this, this will happen. So here's part of it. Here's the rest of it. It completes it. Completive couplets. The book of Proverbs is filled with them. And then corresponding. And that's where they're alike. Here's this. This is just like it. And so this is called parallelism, where really the writer of Proverbs is saying the same thing twice. Here's one. Proverbs 9:10 says, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and the knowledge of the Holy One is understanding. So in this, it's corresponding. If you want to know a little bit about what wisdom means, then look down here. Wisdom is really just understanding. It's understanding. If you don't understand, you can understand, and that's getting wisdom. The fear of the Lord, or the knowledge of the Holy One. If you know, what does it mean to fear the Lord? It means to know the Lord. You're going to see the fear of the Lord. There are two main phrases, two main verses in the book of Proverbs. It says in the first chapter, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Later on it says the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, right here in chapter 9. We can get hung up on what it means to have the fear of the Lord. But this was in fact a figure of speech.
Well, fear doesn't mean fear like when I was a little kid I was afraid of heights.
You used the key word there. When we think of the word fear, we think of being afraid. We think of being afraid. But that is not really what the word, for instance, in the book of Jonah, in the first chapter, when the boat was in great peril in a storm, they were casting lots and figuring out who was who. Like, when we get in a storm down here, the very first thing we got to do is what? We got to figure out whose fault is it. Who's to blame for this storm?
Yeah.
Which seems silly. They asked Jonah, who are you? And what is your occupation? Jonah didn't tell them his name, but he did tell them his occupation. He said, I fear the Lord. I fear the Lord. He didn't mean, he wasn't even afraid of the storm. But don't think of being afraid. The fear of the Lord and the knowledge of the Holy One are concepts that the writer of Proverbs saw as equal. Knowing God. Acknowledging God. Remember, one of my favorite Proverbs is Proverbs 3:5. It says, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not to your own understanding. In all your ways, acknowledge Him. See, the word acknowledge has the word know in it. Do your best to know God. If you're doing your best to know God, then He'll direct your paths. And so the fear of the Lord is not saying you need to be afraid of God. That's not what it's saying at all. It's about the knowledge. And this is helpful. Now, here's the last couplet. Comparatives, where two things. You say, it's like this. These are alike. But they're not corresponding. Better, and he usually uses the word better or than or as or so. Better is a little with the fear of the Lord than great treasure and turmoil with it. So he says, if you just got a little, you're not very rich, but you know the Lord. He said, that's a pretty good deal. But he said, you can have great treasure and have turmoil. He says, because you don't know the Lord. So he says, it's like this. You can know the Lord and you don't know the Lord. And he says, it makes a difference. You would think having a lot of money or being rich or wealthy would make the difference. All right, I brought these from the Living Bible. Let's read through this. These are the Proverbs of King Solomon of Israel, David's son. He wrote them to teach his people how to live. As I said, this is not about how to be religious, how to sacrifice goats or sheep. This is not about the commandments. It's not about being a Hebrew. It's not about holy days. It's not about spirituality. He said, I just want to show you how to live. I want to show you how to live. You know, I've heard many, many people say, as I've studied this book under very capable people who know more than I do, that anybody, whether they're a Christian or not a Christian, can take the book of Proverbs and learn from its teaching. And it's all very practical. It's just how to live. It's about smart living. Smart living. How to act in every circumstance. For he wanted them to be understanding and just and fair in everything that they did. I want to make the simple-minded wise. He said, I want to warn young men about some problems they will face. I want those already wise to become wiser, to become leaders by exploring the depths of meaning in these nuggets of truth. How does a man become wise? So that's the first thing. The first step is to trust and reverence the Lord. Now this is a paraphrase of fear the Lord. And remember, this is about the only religious thing or spiritual thing, that kind of statement that is made in the entire 31 chapters. He says, if you want to be wise, he says, it is foolish not to make step one, getting to know God. Getting to know God, he says, that's the first step in wisdom. You see, he doesn't try to prove that there is a God or that God exists. He says, he just assumes that every wise person, if they already have any grain of wisdom, already know that there is a God. But we need to know Him. We need to seek Him out. We need to find Him. We need to be found of Him. We need to pursue Him. And we need to make Him in our thoughts. And for Solomon, that had nothing, Solomon is the person who actually was used of God to construct the temple where all the sacrifices took place. But when Solomon wrote, he wrote the Song of Solomon, he wrote the book of Ecclesiastes. He didn't write very much about religious things. He says, only fools refuse to be taught. Listen to your father and mother. Those are for most people. Now, not everybody had a good father. Not everybody had a good mother. Not everybody has good parents. But he says, most people, the very first teachers they have are their father and mother. I've met people who have made it a point their whole life never to honor their mother and father. And honor, the primary step of honor, is just listening to them. What you learn from them will stand you in great stead. It will gain you many honors. If young toughs, the Living Bible says, recalcitrant people, thugs we would call them, if young toughs tell you, come and join us, he says, turn your back on them. Come on, be a part of the gang. Be a part of the riot. Join our big, great demonstration. He says, that's not a good idea. You know, I don't believe it's a good idea to be a part of any cause that involves a mob or a gang or a group of people who seem to have no leadership at all. They just simply revving each other up. Will hide and rob and kill. You're going to find people who are murderers, and they're going to say, the reason I committed this murder is because I'm an officer of the law. That's not good reasoning. Being an officer of the law, or a police officer, or an officer of the court, and being a murderer, they're contradictory. Just because a person is a police officer, he doesn't have the right to kill someone. Now, he does have the right to use deadly force, but only when his life is to be forfeit or the lives of others. Only in defense, and only in very severe circumstances. But we know that sometimes, even society's watchers or keepers, sometimes they cross the line, sometimes they are not wise. And if it is, in fact, not just an enforcement of the law, but they commit murder, even when they commit murder, it is wrong. Also, there are people who respond. And we find out that they often expose themselves. We're angry that some injustice was done. And how do they communicate their anger? Or how do they protest? By robbing people and killing people. The writer of Proverbs says, you need to put as much distance as you can from people who are murderers and people who rob, people who kill. Now as Barbara said when she came in, it's very, I don't know if we're going to see it as a coincidental, but it's very appropriate. Right now, we're trying to decide, listen, when someone murders or lawlessly takes the life of another human being, it's always wrong. It doesn't matter who did it or what the circumstances were. Yes, there are often circumstances, and they will be alleviated out in the court. They'll be measured. But if it ever becomes clear that even a lawkeeper trespassed the law, he must be held accountable. He or she must be held accountable. The way of bringing them to justice is not by robbing and killing other people in demonstration. Good or bad, we will treat them all alike. You know, a lot of good people have died this week. A lot of bad people have not been punished at all. Good or bad, we'll treat them all alike. We'll mistreat them. And the loot we'll get, all kinds of stuff. Come on, throw in your lot with us. We'll split with you in equal shares. Don't do it. Don't do it, he says. Don't do it, son. Stay far from men like that. For crime is their way of life. I'm reminded of my dad. My dad had a unique way of viewing mistakes and difficulties and trials. If he heard someone was in a nightclub and they got shot, it didn't matter to Daddy who shot them, or was they bothering somebody, were they harming someone. Daddy would say he shouldn't have been in that nightclub in the first place. Daddy would say he shouldn't have been there. If he was in a bar, he shouldn't have been in the bar. He was out with a bunch of drunks, so he shouldn't have been with them. And I knew that that was my dad's way of looking at things, and I never could come to my dad or my mom and say, well, I just got caught up in where I was at and who I was with. That's the way you shouldn't have been there. You shouldn't have been with them. You shouldn't have been in the car with them. You shouldn't have been walking with them. Well, there's some validity to that. Stay far away from men like that, for crime is their way of life, and murder is their speciality. It's always wrong to protest injustice by killing people. When a bird sees a trap being set, it stays away. And he's just talking about, these people are trying to get you to come. Let's join our riot. Hey, listen, I believe in demonstrating and protesting within the bounds of the law. I believe that there are ways of doing that. I grew up in the 60s when Martin Luther King Jr. was marching across our country in peaceful protest. Martin Luther King never advocated burning anything down, harming anybody, even though black people for whom he was standing were often beaten, abused, and murdered. Join people like that. But when someone comes like these people, he says, you set out a trap where a bird can see it. He says, the bird's not going to get in that trap. So that's what it means to be wise. You ought to be able to look at that and tell that that's a trap. They trap themselves. They lay a booby trap for their own lives. Such is the fate of all who live by violence and murder. They will die a violent death. I believe that something that a Christian point of view, I don't believe that anybody is going to ever get away with murder. Nobody's ever going to get away with a crime. The law enforcement might not catch them. They may never be prosecuted. They may never be arrested. In your eyes and mine and during our lifetime, they may never be punished. But we believe very clearly with great certainty that there's a God in heaven and He's going to bring all people before Him and they will answer for their crimes. Sometimes I think people they feel compelled to do something rash and violent because they're afraid that because this person is not getting the media attention that they deserve, that they're somehow going to get away with doing something wicked or sinful. It's never going to happen. Every sin will come to the light of day. There's going to be a judgment day. Christians believe that. That doesn't mean we're nonchalant or cavalier about the law and about justice. But when there are desperate situations, we don't have to get desperate. If it looks like someone's going to get away scot-free, we don't worry about that. What goes around comes around. You know what Paul said? It's very common. It was a proverb of his day. He said, "Be not deceived. God is not mocked. For whatsoever man soweth, that shall he also reap." Right. Now, someone raised to me this week, said, well, you know, even Jesus got violent one time. You know, if you can look at what's been happening in our society in the last week or two and say, well, that's a lot like what Jesus did when He chased everybody out of the temple. I'm thinking, I have to shake my head a little bit. It kind of hit my brain pan. That doesn't track. You know, Jesus did, when He cleared the temple, He did make a rope, cord, whip. But if you read very carefully in the Greek language, it's very obvious. You know what that whip was for? It was for the animals.
Yeah.
Chase the animals out. The Bible never says that Jesus hit anybody. It says He turned the tables over. He never harmed anybody. He never damaged or injured anybody when He cleared the temple. He was making a statement, and yes, He was showing some sense of anger and wrath. But all of those tables could be set back up. All of the chains could be picked up off the floor. Everything could be put back, and in just a little while, they were all back in business again. All the animals were ushered back in. Jesus didn't hit or hurt anybody. Jesus was never violent toward anybody. It's not comparison at all. It's It's not, say, well, since Jesus did that, we can go out and burn businesses down and murder people. That doesn't fly. You notice a very telling line in there. He pointed to the people that had doves. That had doves. You know, that was if you were very, very poor, you might not own a sheep or an ox or a bull, but you could go catch some birds.
Yeah.
Poor people could do that. You know what Mary and Joseph offered for Jesus when he was 8 days old at the temple? 2 turtle doves. Jesus pointed to those cages that the birds were in. You know what Jesus said? Take these things hence. Get these things out of here.
Make not my Father's house a house of merchandise.
You see, if Jesus had damaged those cages, if he'd opened those cages and chased those birds out, they might never have caught them. Those were somebody's sacrifice. So Jesus was intent on not causing any damage. Take these doves out of here. He didn't release them to the wind. Here in the book of Proverbs it says, variety and killing, murder, and causing harm to other people, good or bad. He says, that's not smart. It's not smart. Wisdom shouts in the street for a hearing. She calls out to the crowds along Main Street and to the judges in their courts, and to everyone in all the land. Ladies, it'd be good to you to know that when he refers to wisdom, he refers to her as if she were a woman. Female. When you think of wisdom.
Amen, brother.
When he was speaking about wisdom, he talked to her about her like she was a woman. You simpletons, she cries, how long will you go on being fools? How long will you scoff at wisdom and fight the facts? Come here and listen to me. I'll pour out the spirit of wisdom upon you and make you wise. I have called you so often, but still you wouldn't come. I have pleaded, but all in vain, for you have spurned my counsel and reproof. You will find it very common when people want to do something wrong, when they want to be violent, when they want to kill or destroy or murder. It very seldom has anything at all to do with the facts, with the truth. Someday you'll be in trouble and I'll laugh, she says. Mock me, will you? I'll mock you. When a storm of terror surrounds you and when you're engulfed by anguish and distress, then I will not answer your cry for help. It will be too late, though you search for me ever so anxiously. Being wise is like a gift of opportunity. You're not always going to have opportunity to be smart. Sometimes when the opportunity is gone, it's gone. You closed your eyes to the facts and did not choose to reverence and trust the Lord. You turned your back on me, spurning my advice. That is why you must eat the bitter fruit of having your own way and experience the full terrors of the pathway you have chosen. Now here's a different kind of phrase. Terror. This is not what he talks about when coming to the feet of God and seeking to know God. He's actually talking about these are actual fears, things to be afraid of. For you turned away from me, wisdom says, to death. Your own complacency will kill you. I'm sorry. It jumped on me. I just had a touch. So I'd go to previous. Your own complacency will kill you. Fools. You'll find that that's the primary word for someone who is not wise. But all who listen to me will live in peace, safety, and be unafraid. Every young man who listens to me and obeys my instructions will be given wisdom and good sense. Yes, if you want to have better insight and discernment and are searching for them as you would for lost money or hidden treasure, then wisdom will be given you and knowledge of God himself. You'll soon learn the importance of reverence for the Lord and of trusting him. So if you look for it, you can find it. If you want to be smart, you can be. Too touchy. Trying to finish. He He grants good sense to the godly, His saints. He's their shield in protecting them and guarding their pathway. He shows how to distinguish right from wrong, how to find the right decision every time. For wisdom and truth will enter the very center of your being, filling your life with joy. I find in human life that one of the greatest causes for great sorrow is often that people make bad decisions. They make bad choices. They need wisdom. All of a sudden, moving my fingers in a hurry. You'll be given the sense to stay away from evil men who want you to be their partners in crime. Men who turn from God's ways to walk down dark and evil paths and exult in doing wrong. They brag about doing wrong. For they thoroughly enjoy their sins. Everything they do is crooked and wrong. Only wisdom from the Lord can save a man from the flattery of prostitutes. Not everything he says about women is flattering here or desirable. He's talking about the women of the night, street women. These girls have abandoned their husbands and flouted the laws of God. Their houses lie along the road to death and hell. The men who enter them are doomed. None of these men will ever be the same again. Follow the steps of the godly instead and stay on the right path. For only good men or good people enjoy life to the full. Evil men lose all the good things that they might have had, and they themselves will be destroyed. Here's a few sayings. Those are listed in your lesson book. You see there, he's not talking about being religious, being a Baptist. He's not talking about being a Christian or even a good Jewish person. He's saying, be smart. Live smart. He says you can if you want to. You can live a smart life. God wants you to. And no matter who you are, or where you're from, or where you're going, God is holding wisdom out to you, and anybody can have it. I'll close with this. In the book of James, chapter 1, verse 5. James says, if any man lack wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives to all men liberally and upbraideth not. If you want to be wise, James says all you have to do is ask God. God bless you all. Thank you very much. We'll conclude our lesson. Thanks to those of you who came for the class.